page 16 of Vision to Pursue, you say that you felt compelled to reject the traditional Christian doctrine of the inerrancy and infallibility of the Bible because of what you saw as a glaring error so serious that it was impossible to deny its existence in the Bible. This is to be found, you say, in just one sentence in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verse 34. Now, obviously, there's a long chapter there. I'm just looking at one verse, but the verse itself says, truly, this is Jesus speaking, apparently, truly, I say to you, this generation will not pass away till all these things take place. This generation, that's the generation of the hearers of Jesus, the first century Christians, will not pass away until all these things take place. What are all these things? Well, if you read the whole chapter, which we're not going to read in full because it's very long, it refers in part to the second coming of Jesus, and also preceded by the destruction of the temple, which took place in AD 70. The Romans came to Judea and destroyed the Jewish temple there. So, I mean, we're 2,000 years later. The second coming obviously did not occur within the generation of those living. So Keith Ward mentions either that the gospel writer was in error in attributing this saying to Jesus, or Jesus himself was mistaken. And these are incredibly serious choices to make. Logically, those seems to be the only two choices, given the premise that it is talking about the second coming. And Keith identifies much wriggling and squirming that he did to evade the point. And I must confess to also much wriggling and squirming myself. In fact, there's more serious than that. It's quite almost psychological suffering, actually. I thought this is such an awful thing to have to wrestle with. And anyway, so in the light of this searing honesty, and this is my question, if I may, how can Christians today still hold to the doctrine of the Trinity and believe in the incarnation of God in Jesus? After all, I would suggest God does not make mistakes.
Okay, right. A simple question. Well, I don't actually think inerrancy is necessary to orthodoxy. A lot of people say it, and sometimes people say God wrote the Bible. But I do think that that's a very misleading thing to say, because the Bible is written in many different languages, mostly in Hebrew and Greek, and in many different styles. And some of the Greek in the New Testament, like especially the Gospel of Mark, is rather ungrammatical. And I think if you say God doesn't make mistakes, I think he doesn't make grammatical mistakes either, really. So I'd say what you've got in the Bible is a record of how people saw Jesus and how people thought of God, and they put their thoughts down, and those thoughts were not inerrant. There's a little piece that comes out of the Roman Catholic view, and that's the very conservative view, as you'd expect, but not quite as conservative as you might think. In Vatican II, when it's talking about the authority of the Bible, it says the Bible is inerrant in all of those things which God wished us to see as necessary for salvation. Well, that's a very sort of statement, really. Which things did God think were necessary for salvation? But it's a view that I myself would accept, that if you say, did Jesus say all the things that you quoted, one in Matthew attributed to Jesus? Did he say exactly all those things? I think anyone would have to reply honestly, no, because it's generally accepted that Jesus spoke Aramaic. And the records of Jesus' words in the New Testament are in Greek. So you've already got a problem that they're not the actual words of Jesus. I think that's just a fact, undeniable fact, that we do not have in the New Testament, in the earliest versions of the New Testament even, the actual words of Jesus. And then if you compare the different Gospels, even the first three, called the Synoptic Gospels, because they all tell more or less the same story in the same pattern of events, you get slightly different ways of putting things, different words. And if it comes to the Gospel of John, that's a totally different approach. It's clearly about the same person, Jesus. Many of the things are the same, but many of the things are not. The most obvious thing is in the first three Gospels, Jesus speaks in short, very cryptic, I think, parables. In John's Gospel, there aren't any parables, but he speaks in long speeches.
Yeah.
So I think the conclusion of this is not the totally radical conclusion that Jesus never said anything like that at all, but simply the conclusion which is more reasonable in dealing with any work of ancient literature. But probably Jesus said things which were very like that, but not exactly like that, and which are difficult to interpret. Now, if you've got that as your background, you say, looking at religious teachers throughout the world, their sayings tend to be cryptic and difficult to interpret and not very straightforward. They have a mystical or spiritual, but hidden to many people, edge. And of course, the Gospels say that about themselves. In Mark's Gospel, it says the reason Jesus spoke in parables was that so that people wouldn't understand, right? When I went to
say, why would you teach in a way that people wouldn't understand? It seems paradoxical to me. Anyway.
Right. It does, doesn't it? And some people can't believe that. Some people say parables are so to make things easy. They're not. They're the opposite of that. It's just that I think religious teachers are trying to teach truths which are very difficult to express. And they do it in metaphor and by using various figures of speech, which people can't